FM Corner. I'm Danny Koontz, Director of Relationship Management for Windy City Equipment. On my podcast today is Terry Companik. Terry is the Senior Facility Manager for Cooper's Hawk. How are you, sir?
I'm good, sir. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing just fine. Let's start with a little conversation about talk about your early career to where you are today. How'd you get there?
Sure. Like a lot of good stories in facilities, mine started at a bar over cocktails. I was I was at my regular watering hole and started talking to somebody there who was also kind of a regular. She turned out to be the director of construction for this winery and restaurant company, and she just thought I'd be a good fit for what they were looking for there. And I was like, okay, sounds interesting. I had no idea what a facilities manager was or even that job existed at the time, right? So there was 8 restaurants then, and almost 13 years later, we've got restaurants in 12 states. Going to be opening up our 70th restaurant here in 2025. So that's it. That's how it started.
And your story is not dissimilar to many that you hear from people in the right place, the wrong time. I mean, right place, right time.
Yeah, it depends how you look at it, but
yeah, exactly. So someone, thinks you have an ability and, most people don't grow up. I'm going to be a facility manager when I grow up. That's not part of the deal. But,
yeah.
It's like you have something that somebody sees that you can grow and learn.
Anybody who talked to their high school guidance counselor or college person and said, "Hey, I want to be a facility manager when I grow up," they'd probably try and talk them out of it, right?
Yeah, exactly right. You're exactly right.
I'm just kidding.
What are your key roles at Cooper's Hawk?
So, that's evolved obviously as the company's evolved. So when I first started, I did everything. A couple of days a week, I would start, I'd start in the restaurants. I'd be carrying tools, doing some little repairs, right? And then heading into the office. And, at the time I could drive to every restaurant. We started to grow out of state, out of Illinois, and move into other locations then. So I still oversee a core group of restaurants. But in addition to that, we have a team of facility managers now. Everybody's got a regional focus. I work on more of the national and regional negotiations, vendor placement, any rollouts, capital projects, and then more such, I guess we'd call them strategic initiatives. So this year we've been working on an asset tagging and inventory project, still ongoing. I've been heading that up, and we're really started to, as we evolved, focus more on, I guess, long-term planning, capital planning, right?
Sure.
So when we started, again, 8 restaurants, a couple years old at the time, we wasn't even on our radar to start thinking about replacing RTUs or replacing roofs, right? But now we're to the point where that's on our radar, and that's pretty common for us to do now. So equipment ages, building ages, you have to adjust. You have to adjust to those things.
Sure, absolutely. How many people are on your facility team, counting your region?
So we just hired another one now, so there's 5 of us. Well, there will be starting in January. We'll have our 5th one there. So we kind of carve out it's somewhat geographically based, but not necessarily, because we're so spread out. As we've got restaurants as far as Arizona, and then we are in, we're heavy in Illinois and Florida. We've got restaurants in Michigan and Wisconsin, Missouri, Maryland, Virginia. We're going to be in Georgia starting next year. So we're pretty spread out. So there's still, to say it's really geographical or regional, people still got to hop on a plane sometimes, but that's part of the job too.
Absolutely. Good.
Yeah.
Kind of what are 3 things you think that it takes to be successful in the doing facility management in the restaurant industry? Because it's totally different than retail. But
I'll tell you, I'd probably answer this question like I would a lot of jobs or anything in life. It's I'd like to say follow up and just say respond to you 3 times. Say follow up, follow up, follow up, because it's a big part of what we have to do as facility managers go for our teams and teams. I'll say for our, I guess I would say our customers, right? So our customer is the people in the restaurants, the
Sure.
operation people.
Sure.
Um, they're, especially this time of year and with our business model, that we're super busy this time of year.
Hmm.
We've been busy in the restaurant, just like a lot of restaurants are. We do a lot of private events in our restaurants, so there's a lot of holiday parties and such going on. So the operators don't have time, nor should they be focusing on following up with vendors about, broiler burners, when are they coming in, or whatever else it is, right?
Sure.
So, so it's not just following up with vendors; it's following up with the people in the restaurants, um, sticking to what you do when you're in the restaurant. So you go into a restaurant and you walk around and you help them out as much as you can, and then you follow up afterwards. You're only as good as what you do to follow up when you're done.
Sure.
Um, you lose a lot of credibility really quick if you don't do those things. Probably but this is also part of being good at follow up is figuring out how to be organized when you've got a million things coming at you. And, as the saying goes, when everything's an emergency, nothing is.
Sure.
Um, in facilities, you get that all the time. But
Sure.
you got to figure out how to organize your day. Um, and at the same time, remembering that while we're all in a business and facilities and restaurateurs and vendors are in it to make money, there's still people involved in all of this. And I think it really came to light more like during COVID, where we were still trying to keep the restaurants open and operating and everything. Um, every vendor and restaurant company is dealing with so many issues and uncertainty and parts and not knowing what's going on. You got to remember that it's not just cogs in a machine. It's a bunch of people who are trying to go about their day. Some are better in it than others, but people are trying to go through their day and, um, get through it as best they can while maintaining, helping out the restaurants in one way or another. Again, whether it's a vendor or not, we really focus on the partnership side with our vendors, right? We've never been one to jump ship from vendors really quickly. It's just not how we operate either as a company, kind of our, as a whole.
Sure. Now, and I think, sometimes it's just little lessons that you can help people with. I know I've had conversations with members of our team, and let's say you, although you don't, but let's just say it was you, and you had called at 12 o'clock to follow up on an item.
Mhm.
And at 1:15, you call back because you hadn't got the answer yet. And sometimes the first answer from the person on the other end of the phone when they hang up is, "Why is he calling me? He just called me an hour ago." I'm like, "Well, you don't understand. The person he works for is probably standing 10 feet away from him saying, call him again." He
Yep.
might not necessarily even want to call again because he knows he just called an hour and he knows how it works. However, the person that he works for or whatever partners with in operations, whoever that may
Right.
be pushing that. And so he has to do it. That could be part of it. I always remember at Ruby Tuesday, I worked in an office and my job was get stuff fixed. And
Yeah.
nobody came by there and nobody, you just did it. Hurricanes came. I'm the most important guy in the building. I see people I've never seen before from the executive floor who are now standing outside my building wanting to know how many restaurants are closed, when are they
Yep.
opening, what's going on. And people are like, wow, it matters. I mean, you just have to understand the dynamics of the job.
All of a sudden when you have, an Ansel go off in one of the restaurants, when are we going to reopen? Right?
Mhm. Sure.
How
Yeah,
soon? Why aren't they there yet? What do you
exactly.
mean? What does this mean? And then all of a sudden you're explaining that whole process um, to people who, again, are people in operations. They are highly skilled at running restaurants, and they shouldn't have to know those things. That's why we're here. That's our
Yeah,
job, right?
yeah,
We're the subject matter experts. So that's what we're supposed to be here for. But
that's exactly right.
yeah, yeah.
This probably ties into part of the answer that you just gave, but in choosing your vendors to partner with, what are the key items you look for?
Um,
Follow up, obviously, being at the top of the
yeah,
list.
follow up from the vendors is huge. just clear, again, this won't surprise anybody, but clear communication, honest communication. Um, we go to a good example is you might go to you might meet with a new vendor, whether you go to RIFMA and meet with them on the exhibit hall floor,
Sure.
or you go to a restaurant and meet with somebody in a market you're new in, and you're probably meeting with a salesperson who's kind of selling you on the business a little bit. And I always end up having the conversation with them. Listen, let's be honest from the beginning. I need to know what you can do. More importantly, what you can't do, because that's going to be real obvious. And if you sell the world to me and then you can't back it up, then that's a different story than being realistic and having hiccups along the way. So I
Sure.
guess being honest, we expect a good amount of honesty, as we should from all the
Sure.
vendors, but clear communication on that. We I feel like, having spoken with a lot of our peers and people on our team who came from other restaurant concepts, that we are, and I mean myself as well, we're fairly high maintenance when it comes to what we expect out of our vendors. However, we let them know up front, right? You know what you're looking for, you know what you're going to look for from us from the beginning. So
Sure.
it's not really a surprise. But the flip side of that, we have a lot of vendors we have worked with a long time, for a long time, as a result of that. So again, I think you really need to build, and I don't want to say it's a cliche, but it's true. You really have to build a partnership with the vendors, um, and not just look at it straight. It's not always down to dollars and cents. While it's important, we're looking for clear communication, fast and accurate follow up, and keeping our restaurants running as best they can. So that's really more of a focus for us than anything else.
Always called to your earlier point. I call it overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah,
And say yes and then hang the phone up and try to figure out how to do it. And
yeah.
that's a recipe for disaster at some point down the
Well,
road. So,
I I
you know,
I won't call out the specific industry or trade, but we have had, specifically with a specific trade, over the years, it's been such a pain point, and we've tried multiple vendors over the years who have sold us. I don't want to say salespeople will blow smoke, but sometimes they do, and we give them the business, and then they just fail. And to me, it's almost a shame, because they're selling us on this, and then they're just falling down, and it's really too bad when those kind of things happen.
it's
Again, just be honest, right? Just be
sure.
honest. Tell us what you can do.
It's funny, in my former days as a facility manager, I didn't necessarily even want to talk with the sales folks because I
Yeah,
understood what their job was.
yeah,
My number one question to anybody was, I don't care about any of that. No presentation, no nothing. Just tell me who you work for. That's
yep,
what I care about, because I'll call them because I know them. And I'm going to call them and I'm going to ask them and they're going to tell me because I've done the same for them.
yep,
I don't need the we're greater than everybody on earth and all that, because I don't need that stuff. Just
yep.
tell me who you work for. And if you're as
Well,
good as you say you are, they'll tell me that.
they'll tell us the truth,
Yeah,
good, bad, or indifferent. So,
sure.
and it's funny, because that's how RIFMA and the RIFMA conference are very valuable for us as a company, and for me as well. Attending over the years, you really get to know you get to know the vendors, but you're walking around the exhibit floor, and at this point, you walk around and you've seen most of the people there, their companies, maybe you've worked with some of them, and they're all trying to give you the nice folder with all the glossy pictures and the
Sure.
brochures and everything. And I'm just like, yeah, keep it. Just keep it.
Yeah, you're right.
Who are your references? Because I know if they're here, I'm going to talk to them and
Sure.
get some information from them.
Right.
And then it's super important too to be able to talk to some of the other facilities people that are out there, right? um, Whether they're newer or older to the industry or whatever, but you can walk around and have a good conversation with some FMs who have experience with those vendors or with the same problems or whatever. So, to your point, it's very easy to go, I don't want to say check somebody's references, but get a little bit of a scoop on
Yeah.
companies that are
Just
out there.
checking that, and that leads into the Riffman question I have. But that other part was too of going to someone who I did it many times. operated a different chain. I'm like, I got a problem. I have a smell in my bathroom. I can't get rid of it. I don't know if it's a design issue. I don't know what it is. Here are all the things I've done. And have somebody look at you and 5 minutes later go, did you do this?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. Never thought of that. Well, I had the same problem, and that's what somebody told me, and so instead of Googling or instead of doing all that
Yeah.
money spent trying to figure it out, odds are if I have that problem, another chain's going to have a problem too. So why don't I go ask somebody, and maybe they've already figured it out and they can help me, or I could help them.
Well, that's a really good example because it doesn't matter if you're Cooper's Hawk, any other restaurant chain out there, you've had a smelly bathroom issue
Yeah, I
before,
mean,
right? Somebody's gone through it. There might be that one thing that you didn't go through, but you'd like to think you've gone through that checklist.
sure,
But yeah, I mean, somebody's dealt with something like that in the past. It's funny, and when we were going through the process for hiring a new FM, we go through the regular interview process, and then our last step is it's kind of some case studies, some scenarios we throw out at them. And one of the scenarios was this very in-depth thing where we had a water issue in one of the restaurants, and it took forever to figure it out. So it ended up being like the least likely thing you would think of. But um, we throw that out there. We kind of throw them into this scenario and see what they're going to do, see how they think, and try and get a better idea. More importantly, how they're going to kind of troubleshoot it and what they're
sure,
going to do.
sure. Oh, that's
And,
great. That is great.
yeah.
What's the hardest part of managing a facilities team?
Um, so for a majority of the time at Cooper's Hawk, I was a one man show. So, the focus has always been get answers fast, right? Just like anybody else. Um, so for me, currently, it's hard for me to let things go. Um, you see the emails roll in or the work orders roll in, and it's a restaurant that I've worked with in the past or what have you. So it's hard for me to let it go and let the team deal with it and try and let them go. The other thing too, and I kind of talked about it, is trying to figure out how to help people be organized, right? So um if you've had a lot of jobs in the past, which a lot of people have, you've always had a boss who said, this is how you're going to do your day. And that doesn't work for most people, right? Everybody's organized in a different way. It certainly doesn't work in facilities because
Sure.
you don't own your day anyway. But telling somebody, okay, you have to have a notebook to organize your day, or you have to use Outlook or OneNote or whatever, it just depends on the person. So trying to help people, guide them, and give them the tools to be organized, because you can't follow up if you're not organized, right? You can't maintain the day, you can't keep ahead of things unless you're organized some way. So people like to do it different ways. And it kind of goes into too, there's a lot of people in facilities with different backgrounds, different personalities. Most people didn't start off, we talked about earlier, people didn't start off going, oh yeah, I'm going to be a facility manager. Somebody started off as an HVAC tech, or they started off owning their own service company, or whatever it is, right? Some people had training from a mentor in facilities when they started. Some people were given a laptop and a phone and said, okay, go fix things. So everybody's different in this field. So you got to try and kind of figure out how to navigate the best way to keep the team focused, and how to stay organized, and to do their jobs, right?
Sure. That's great. And I thought I'd tie on real quick to a point you made about you being the doer and then managing your team and not necessarily being a doer. I used to meet with all the different operational teams at Ribby's when they came to the office for meetings and so on. I did a 30-minute thing on facilities. As I walked out the door, my parting line was, if you ever don't know who to call, just call me. Okay.
Yeah.
My team comes into my office after about 2 years of doing that and said, hey, as long as you tell them to call you, we're never going to get the opportunity to do what you do.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it just hits you like, I think I'm helping. No, I'm not helping. I'm hurting. And so, I changed it and started saying, speak to a member of my team and blah, 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 blah. And, you know, not me per se.
Yep. Yep.
And played it out as a joke. I'm getting older. I can't remember anything, whatever it was. But
Y'all are.
that hit because my team said, we will never get that opportunity if we're not presented with it. And you have to do that, and then my I have a very old school way of doing stuff, but I had yellow pads and I
Yep.
wrote down everything I need to do. And every morning I rewrote the list
Yep.
because sooner or later I get tired of writing the same thing down 5 days in a row. I'm going to fix it today
Yep.
because I don't want to write down anymore. So
Well,
however you choose to do it, as
right.
long as it works is the,
Well, and that's one way to do it. I know, like, people on our team, that's how they do it. I use Outlook, and I try, every day, I try to get the oldest email in my box taken care of, right? And you know what the oldest email in my box was today?
well,
It was from you about getting set up to do this. So I get to check that box because everything else has been newer because we've been trying to schedule this for a minute. So,
yeah, that is great.
um,
What's the most rewarding part of the job, Terry?
you know, it's funny because we talk about it as a team. This isn't the job where you get a lot of thank yous, right? You don't, we don't get a lot of accolades for those things. Usually we're spending a lot of money in the process, but we're getting things fixed, right? Um, it's just not how the industry's built.
Sure.
It's just not how it is. Every now and then you get a shout out, from somebody, maybe in operations or whatever, that we're doing a great thing. But you got to figure it out on your own. The rewards got to come from yourself. I personally I like when somebody on our team gets a compliment, right?
Mhm.
You mentioned hurricanes. What years ago when there was hurricanes and it was just me, I was dealing with them in Florida. Now we've got a guy who lives in Florida, so a hurricane comes through, he takes care of it. I almost never get involved in that anymore.
Sure.
And all we get is accolades about how great of a job he does, right? So, those kind of things, that makes me feel good as somebody who's trying to help lead a team, is that if they're doing such a good job, they're getting compliments. That's good. Personally, I talk, you talk about those big issues where you're trying to problem solve. Maybe it's a complex issue. Maybe it's something like, I don't know, the restroom odor you can't get rid
Sure.
of, or, you do have something, an emergency situation, whether it's a fire related thing or an Ansel discharge, those kind of things. So getting those things, getting the restaurants back up and running after those kind of things as fast as you can, and knowing you'd got it done as fast as you can, as best as you could, that's kind of where you've got to get the rewards for yourself from.
Sure. Sure.
Because you're not
Well,
getting
and I
tons.
think every now and then, and you're right. I mean, every now and then, just someone will say, "Hey, man, thanks."
Yeah.
And that's about as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Is somebody says that. I think the other thing, you're still working. I'm in a different side of the industry now. But Terry, I have a half a dozen folks that worked at Ruby Tuesday in operational roles.
Yeah.
I help them today, and I haven't been there in 11 years.
Yeah.
That's the true thank you.
Yeah.
Is 11 years later, you're working for company X, I'm working for company Y, and you're calling me telling me you got a problem and you want to know what I think. That's when it matters. Not while you
Well,
were there, but after you're gone. So
well, that's you too. Everybody knows you and knows your knowledge, but no, I totally get that. You're still thought of as being that, again, the phrase is subject matter expert, right? You're still thought of that way. So that's a great rewarding for you.
well, I think it helps. Again, after
Yeah.
the fact, during the course of the fire, if they said thank you once every 6 months, okay, good, I got it. I'm
Yeah.
good with
No,
that.
that's good.
Hopefully delivering, what they need. But there are down the road benefits that pay as well sometimes.
I was in one of our restaurants yesterday, and the general manager there is newer to being the GM there, and I had met him in person before, so I got a chance to meet him in person, and I just noticed something while I was walking around about some repairs that needed to be done, and And then after the fact, I reached out to a vendor to make sure they could handle it. And then I sent him a follow-up email and said, hey, by the way, when I was there, I noticed this, and I've got somebody lined up to do it. And he sent me just an email directly back, said, thanks for all you do. I appreciate that. I didn't even know that was an option. So, um, you know, that's part of that is educating people,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So they know, and then seeing that light bulb go off, like, oh, okay, now I understand. So instead of just saying you got to get this fixed, telling them why and how, it was a flooring issue, right? And it doesn't matter what kind of floor you have in your kitchen. If there's an issue with the floor, it doesn't get better on its own.
Sure. Kind of like bad
So
news. Doesn't get
yeah,
better the longer you wait to tell somebody.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you got quarry tile or this one was the silical flooring product we had there. So it doesn't matter what it is. It,
Yeah.
it gets worse over time.
Sure.
So but seeing the education work in the restaurants and results from it's always super helpful.
Well, I think every time you're out there, and sometimes it's hard, and you get so many locations you can't travel or you can't be in buildings, but it does so much because there's a far different cry than an email out about here's a potential floor problem that everybody has, and here's what you ought to do, versus standing in their kitchen and going, here's what caused it, here's this, here's what you do, you know, and the ability to talk to those people, go and show them, okay, I'm the facility manager, but big deal.
Yeah.
I'm in your building. Let's talk about what's wrong and let me try to help you,
Yeah.
not punish you, help you, with things that are wrong or things that I see or things that you see that you don't know how to fix. Let's try to help.
Yeah.
Big
It's
deal.
that's the fun part about the job, right?
Sure.
It's fun. Who doesn't want to be the smartest person in the room? So not to say I'm always the smartest person in the room. Quite honestly, sometimes I'm in the restaurant and they present a problem and I say, I don't know, but I'll figure it out and get back to you, you know?
Exactly right.
Um,
Exactly right. That's great. Who are your mentors?
Probably, it's one of those things, right? Where you think about who has mentored you the most in life or had the longest term effect. And, I would say first off, it's got to be my dad or my parents, but my dad definitely. Um, I just remember him at a really young age telling me basically the whole if you aren't early, you're late. And you don't really realize till later in life how important it is just to, how important time is and being on time, right?
Sure.
And the second part of it, he always taught me is having a sense of humor. So I think a lot of my sense of humor comes from him and being able to have that in any situation, any job definitely helps if you're in the right job, I think anyway. Some jobs it doesn't fit in, but in our job, you got to have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
You got to have a sense of humor to get through the day.
Sure.
And outside of that, my first job was with this grocery store and butcher shop in the town I grew up in. And I started off there stocking shelves, and then I eventually got promoted to assisting the butchers there. And being the butcher's assistant was basically cleaning up the cutting room and the equipment when they were done at the end of the day. So yeah, that was a promotion because I mean it was more money. It was more money and a lot more responsibility, right?
Right. Sure.
But the owner, the guy who owned the business, he'd also been my little league baseball coach, right? So I knew him for years, his family friend as well. But he really, for that first job, he really taught me the benefit of hard work and that it pays off. Again, showing up on time, doing your job. Even back then, it was a question of following up and doing what you're supposed to do. So um, it was a very big impact. And I think about that a lot, right? I think about that a lot because one way or another, you see that in people, and maybe they didn't have that growing up. There's a lot of challenges with people's work ethics, I guess.
Sure. Sure. Right.
So,
Right.
and now, I mean, Dan Martin, he's a great leader. He's a great guy. He's
He
a good
is.
person. He gets,
Truly is.
he gets, he gets the job. He gets life. He gets everything. And then the other people on our team, combined with him, it really makes a a difficult job a lot more tolerable when you're working with somebody like that and the people on our team. So
Sure. No, he's great. Absolutely. Um, my last question. Give me
yeah,
a quote or something that guides you to keep things in perspective. Kind of
sure.
your go-to.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I'm telling my kids this every couple of days too. And it was funny because when I was thinking about some of these questions, it made me think back to what I was just saying about my dad is, don't waste time, right? Because you can't make time, you can't buy time, and what's time's gone, you can't get it back. So it's just important to live your life and make time count because it's probably the most valuable thing you've got. So
That's great. Great point. I said last question, but quick. Where do you see Cooper's Hawk in 5 years?
just keep growing. Um, we continue to expand in new markets. I mentioned, we're going to be opening our first one in Georgia next year. Um, we're expanding. We've got a pizza concept that we opened up that currently just has one location. We're opening those in some other areas in the next year and beyond. So just riding along with it, having fun and trying to keep up with the even faster growth. We're going to keep going.
That's great. Well, Terry, thank you so much for taking some time today on the FM Corner, kind of talk a little facility stuff, a little career stuff. I think it's always good for people to listen. If they're a facility manager, listen to other people that are in the same business and thoughts. And then hopefully sometimes, people don't like to necessarily raise their hand and ask a question, but they can listen to a podcast or something like that and go, hey, that's a good idea, or I didn't think of that. And they have the ability to go ahead and, follow up on it or execute it. And they didn't have to ask anybody. People don't want to say, I don't know. Can you, but they can hear it through conversation with other people. So
Sure. I say I don't know every day. I think it's I think being humble in this industry is just as important as anything.
I
Right?
tell you, you're exactly right. Agree
For sure.
100%. So thank you very much for the time. We appreciate everybody listening, and we'll see you on the next FM Corner.